Thank you, Anupama. Thank you for coming and doing this for us. We'll now move on to the second part, which will be the panel discussion. So request the panelists to please come on, and we need the chairs to go up. And while that comes in place, welcome, Mr. Shunkat. It's good to see you here. I'd like to just read out a little bit, each one's, an introduction to each of the panelists, because many of us don't know who we are. So Piero came from Florence, where he did his architecture studies. He trained in Finland and worked for some years before landing in Oroville just after the inauguration in 1968. And he almost went to work immediately, starting with the aspiration, community building, and soon after the Matri Mandir. In fact, in those early days, Piero was the single person we used to look up to, until the time, the space frame of Matri Mandir went up, and the inside, the inner chamber, everything was done. Piero was our one reference point. And of course, after that, he has continued. He built Certitude, which was one of the first residential projects. He built Transition School, Future School, and best of all, Unity Pavilion. Actually, I must tell you, he didn't really want to come. But when I told him it was happening at Unity Pavilion, he said, maybe. So that was it. Helmut, before coming to Oroville in 1979, worked for 10 years in Stuttgart in Germany, planning and designing universities, medical buildings. And in Oroville, of course, we know Helmut's work primarily at the Grace community and most importantly, the Savitri Bhavan next door. I was actually interested to learn how Helmut associates the architectural principles and textures with the laws of music. And hopefully that is what the city will one day be for us. A kind of music as we walk through it, live in it, discover it, and for which the city plan might be a very good companion. Tuan's first day in Oroville was to push the wheelbarrow at the Matri Mandir, whenever he could get it away from Kenneth, I'm told. He worked in Matri Mandir for several years before moving on to set up Oroville's electrical service, and has since served in setting up different services and infrastructures for the city, and has been part of possibly every working group over the years, and is a founding member of Oroville Renewable Energy Group and Oroville Consulting, which focuses on sustainable development-related assignments. And then we come to our more non-professional input on our panel. So Judith came in 1971, has always been a strong service-oriented presence in Oroville. I remember her as part of Oroville Fund, part of Oroville's economy. She served, I think, almost 9 years on FAMC, right? And then we also found her, behind the counter in the bakery. And for the moment, you'll find her at the Matri Mandir's Access Group. But what really blew my mind about Judith is that she has actually come up with a very sophisticated and very detailed vision for a line of force. So that's why she's here today. Then Mandakini, you all know Mandakini, she's in the working committee. How can you not miss her? How can you miss her? So Mandakini was born in Promes and later grew up in the ashram before she returned to Oroville to live here permanently. Giacomo was visiting Oroville frequently for almost 10 years before he decided to join in 2014. He was living in the forest and working in the town hall. Now, how he pulled that off, I don't know. But, he also teaches martial arts, so that must be it. So there we go. Shall we start on a round of questions? Perhaps Helmut, if you would have something to either comment or to present a question to, we can just go on around first.
Yeah, I'm personally very much astonished whenever I hear what a well-formulated brief Roger has given to the the people who are supposed to build the city. The question which immediately arrives, of course, is why didn't we follow that brief?
How can I explain the disobedience of humanity?
Edzard, just wait till after tea time. We'll take all your questions, all your comments. Thank you. I know. That doesn't matter.
No, I would say that I admire the faith of Anupama in the planning. I myself, I was, even before coming to Auroville, I was doing planning work in Italy, and I became a skeptic after banging, so to say, with the indifference of most of the administrators, of the not only normal citizen, but also qualified people. No? That is the typical question, no? That was just raised now. No? Why we have to obey? No? Why have to follow? So this is a main theme going on still now. I see that Anupama have a impeccable faith, and I admire that for what it is.
Perhaps Tuan, would you like to take? Oh, Giacomo, go. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's go on the thing. Yeah.
I have the feeling that after having seen that, I didn't know, but I was waiting for this. I was waiting for what I saw here, no? It's like somehow Anupama formulate what I felt I had inside about the mystery of this city, you know? And I don't know how, but it can help to solve the polarity that we are living daily here on our skin.
Yeah, a small correction in your introduction. It is not that I was trying to get a wheelbarrow whenever Kenneth was going to give it to me. When I entered the Matrimondia for the first time, Kenneth was pushing a wheelbarrow full of concrete. He could see on my face that I was wondering what to do, and he gave it to me, and he said, take care of it, and I was pushing the wheelbarrow all the time. And I don't know what he did in the meantime. So, and I've seen that, in fact, I felt all the life in Auroville is like pushing that wheelbarrow. And it is a very joyful work to do. While the presentation was going on, I just wrote down 3 or 4 small points which just struck me. The first one is, Matrimondia has actually set a standard for Auroville in terms of beauty, in terms of perfection, harmony, and truth. And Matrimondia should be the benchmark for the whole city. I was just telling yesterday somebody, we were on a construction site yesterday, and the person was complaining about the finishing of the concrete. I said, Piero insisted always to use fresh plywood for the concrete, fresh plywood. And I don't know if you know, but nothing had to be plastered in Matrimondia. The concrete could be left as it is, and that's perfection. Second comment, planned development does not mean rigid development. It means conscious development. Third is, can we get back to that same level of engagement that we had in Matrimondia construction with the city? Can we start pushing wheelbarrows, all of us? All of us should get involved in building the city in some form or the other. And then, you made some comments, Anu, about how outside people look at Auroville. I just want to add 2 to it. There is our great friend, Herbert Girardet. He is one of the founders of the World Future Council. And when he visited Auroville, he made a very interesting presentation where he shows a picture of the agropolis, the time when everything was driven by agriculture. Then the second picture is the petropolis, which is the New Yorks and the cities of today, where everything runs on oil, one-way traffic. And then his third picture was the ecopolis. And you know how it looked? It looked like Auroville. There was a city and a green belt, and he calls it the regenerative city, where the city gives back to nature and nature gives back to the city in a closed loop. So then I told Herbert during the lunch, next time you have to put a fourth picture called the Auropolis. And my second quote is by Peter Head. Peter Head was earlier with Anup, a very big consultant. They did all these big projects in China, and he has come out of it, and he has started his own organization called the Sequestration Trust. He is actually trying to do projects where the carbon gets absorbed. And he came here, and he made a presentation, and he was asked by one of the participants, Peter, with all your experience, what is the sustainable density of a city? He said literally this: it is not New York. It's too dense, too vertical, too much energy. It's definitely not the Auroville of today. Our calculations show that a good average city density is 10,000 population per square kilometer. And I almost fell off my chair, because Auroville is 5 square kilometers, and 5 into 10 is 50. So that is also an interesting observation by an outsider.
As I was listening to Anupama, I think the first thing that struck me was that it's strange after all these years that we even almost have to have this discussion. We never, any one of us came here, as I would say, under any false advertising. From the beginning, we all knew that Auroville was supposed to be a city of 50,000 people. I came in 1971. The galaxy plan was already there. The utter beauty of it was one of the things that already brought me here. But I also knew when I came that it was to try to manifest in the material this beauty by learning to be also beautiful within ourselves and together with each other. We've been trying to perhaps put more emphasis on that inner process over these last 50 years than actually doing the material manifestation. But we're not getting very far. We divide ourselves in that way. As Anupama, she mentioned that. And I feel that Matrimondia has already shown to us that if we actually work together, each one of us bringing all the amazing diverse skills and knowledge and aspiration that we have to the process, we will find something that is utterly satisfying to all of us. Whether we lean more to buildings or trees, there is space for this to emerge in a wonderful harmony, and that this galaxy plan that we were given has all the flexibility and, in that sense, within it, to allow all of our sensibilities to be satisfied, and also all our aspirations to build something that's truly the city the earth needs. The city that answers humanity's questions about environment, ecology, living in peace and harmony together. And that's what somehow, since this line of force thing fell into my head while I was sitting in the inner chamber of Matrimondia, has become for me the whole point about it. It's not about building a building. It's about how to build a building, how to build the city.
I feel pretty overwhelmed sitting here with the who's who of Auroville and the who's who of Auroville facing me. And, and I really don't know what function I have to, I ought to, or I'm supposed to, or what's going to come down through me to everyone here. But I'm not so much into really talking and having endless discussions, and I know that Auroville is split about this whole planning thing. And for me, when I came to Auroville, it was, my jaw dropped when I realized that the community is split about such a thing. For me, it was quite a given. I'd never seen all this. I just knew that there was the mother who chose Roger. They thought head to head, or heart to heart, or soul to soul, or whatever it is. Something came down. And for me, those are sufficient criteria to go ahead with that. So I still do not understand why Auroville is split with this, and I know this is an extremely touchy and controversial topic, and I know I'm getting into something which is really, really, my heart's thumping right now. I have no idea who's going to send me emails or say something on Oronet about me and whatever. But come what may, for me it's very simple. And really, thank you for sharing myth versus facts, especially Anupama, because really that made things a lot more clear, because I did ask earlier when I just arrived, what is really the problem? What are we really split about? So I think I saw some light there. I'm sure the other side, which is the one which is the other side of the split, has a lot to say also, and I understand that we haven't heard from them. But all of that does not matter to me, because it was the mother and it was she who chose Roger, and they came up with something, and I think we need to further look into how to materialize it. And I also had the same question, like also when Helmut said it. I don't know. I still don't have an answer, except that our outer reality is often, I'm not saying it's the case here, I have to be very politically correct right now, but very often our outer reality is an expression of our inner development. And if we are not being able to build and materialize a city, it's because we are not looking within. As a collective, individually, I know we are all looking. And individually, I understand we all have our own understanding and translation of how to apply the integral yoga, let's say, in practice. Whatever it is, collectively, we are not looking at what is our collective inner development. And planning and bringing materializing a city is also a collective effort. So we have to assess both those things and see which one needs first work, or which one is going to follow what. So I don't know if I can have a very constructive discussion here, but I'll stay. I'm happy to observe. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Mandakini. Thanks, everybody. Actually, I'd just like to link Mandakini and Helmut once more for what you both raised over there. And what Edzard came out over there about disobedience. And I was just thinking perhaps we need to come to terms with the fact obedience, I think it gets everybody's goat. Nobody wants that word. But the fact is, in that first line of the charter, we do have that word, willing servitor. So somewhere we need to come to terms with it actively. It's been almost 50 years. We've gone through a certain phase of growth, for whatever it was worth. There's no point at this stage to blame anyone. We were all in this. We made the decisions because of a certain situation, let's say, a certain lack of knowledge which was not available. And even for me, it was a moment when I was working, I've been talking about a book that I've been working on, that I really had to hunt for facts. Because there are certain things I had just generalized, but where was the reality, the actuality of that? And funnily enough, I ran into her. I hadn't seen her for many, many years. And I started asking, because I wasn't getting these answers from anybody. And it was very refreshing to suddenly have somebody who could give you a straight answer about the city without this whole fog we have about this one said that and this that happened and the whole personality issue. And the reason, maybe I should just stand up, the reason we came to this presentation is how do we now, knowing what we do, knowing our differences, come to terms with the fact that this is a project which was given to humanity by something higher. It's not our project. And how is it that we can ensure that we can carry it forward for the next 50 years or so, intact, without deforming it or distorting it, to carry it in the best spirit? And
I just made a joke to escape the real answer that I would like to give Helmut and Edzard, because I must say that whenever many friends I have, really dear friends, many people wonder why am I even friends with them. Like Rauf Ali was a very dear friend. Dharmesh is a very good friend. Everybody thinks there's something suspicious that I am a friend of someone who is disliking what they think I stand for and what they think that other one stands for. But you know why? I really, even Edzard, I'm saying I'm not provoked, but I tell you, I have this feeling in me too. What Edzard feels, I'm again using it as an instance, that I see city planning, there is a process in city planning and in management of cities which is about negotiating between things. And this is there's a method, we learn about it. And what I would like to say, why don't people follow? I would like to again, because I feel a lot Roger's presence when I was preparing this thing. And when you asked me this, and I just wanted to dodge both the questions because I had got a lot of brickbats in my Auroville meeting. I was very inexperienced at that time. I used to, not know how to handle it because I came from a big city, Bombay. Nobody judges each other and all. So I did that and to escape. But then after some time, I want to tell the answer. Roger used to pass on this works to me and say, you develop the whole administration zone. And it was like a design, like a review. You go in school, no? Every 2 weeks you do more and they tell you things. And they say, go read that book, do this, study those 4 examples and compare that and this, so like this. But I must say, I had the same relation to Helmut, more on architectural level. And that's why I'm so happy to sit between Piero and Helmut, because I greatly admire, and Gloria, the work and the standard of architecture, that the aspiration for that they represent. So for me, I did not see a conflict. I do not see a conflict with my Greenbelter friends or others. I really do not see the conflict. I see the place in the city where they could do their thing and freely grow rather than do it with a lot of awkwardness. So I want to say in Roger's words, I asked him one day, why are you giving me all these big things to do, Roger? Why don't you give me a sketch and I develop? In fact, I did those works. It was not that Roger gave me a sketch and to draft. He never made me work like a draftsman of his idea. He told me, design the variations that are possible in this habitat and this and that. But I asked him, why aren't you giving me a sketch? It'll be so much easier. I have no problem of that obedience on that level because I used to admire the work and I like to do it. So he said, because I have to work on now, I have very little time, he told me. This was 5 years before he passed away. He said, I have very little time. I want to concentrate on, I have to save, literally his words came in my mind. I have to save what can still be saved. This is what he told me. And he said that the area where I am going to put my energy is to clarify the governance of Auroville. I could not understand why he used to always give charts of beautiful looking structures of how Auroville's governance should be. And because then he told me that there is no time for this. You do the plans, I can only give reviews. You please do this. I am busy with clarifying the governance of Auroville. Years later when I studied urban management, And when I was teaching how to measure the indicators of cities that work and don't work, and all the cities like Berlin, where the people's participation could improve cities, and Germany is very good in this, but the northern, like Copenhagen and all, are even better. What they measure it by is good urban governance. So I said, oh, Roger was always talking about governance, because governance allows you that everybody can get what they want. So I don't fear Edzard's comment, because there are many areas to be like that. I know he doesn't mean to be disobedient or obedient, and I have the tendency to be disobedient as much as I have it to be obedient. But we want to all choose where it is aligned with our personal work, that we feel like, and we always feel we fear others, but a good plan positions us, a good plan with a good governance working. There is no city that has progressed where governance was bad and the city was good. So we have to work on the last line of Roger. He said, the problem is that all the working groups and all, including the planning office, they are only working on day to day. They decide to be a planning group, then every day they only see there's a conflict, where should I put the electrical room? They are doing day to day things. Nobody is taking care of the city. He said the entire governance is wrong. Everybody's governance is set up for what? Not for its own sake. It is not for running day to day and managing day to day needs and affairs and conflicts. Governance should be set up like in the mother's time. What governance do we need to have to first develop a city and then manage it?
Actually, I have two things to put to both Helmut and to Anu, and maybe even Piero and whoever wants to add. First, about governance and the city plan. One day I was talking to Helmut, and he suddenly, looked at Savitri Bhavan and said, okay, we have it here, but is it the right place? Is it in the right place in the city? You know, I have the Integral Health Center on the Crown. Is it in the right place? I don't know. And this is where we need to, a few weeks ago there was, the ITDC had done this presentation of the new projects, and I'd requested that at least let us see where all these projects are emerging in the city plan. Is it making the city plan emerge, or is it not? And one thing, to go back to Roger's first, the report to the mother, when he comes back with the report, I was very surprised that one of the first things is a heading which says the face of the city. Now, so I just wondered, what does he mean, face of the city? Why is that so important? You know? And suddenly you realize the mother had been talking ever since she came up with the dream. She was talking about new forms are needed for the new force. And this face had to emerge, and that was very important. And obviously the entire thing cannot happen at one go. And in an interview, he mentions that as the population grows, the face should correspondingly start to emerge. So it's very important. I don't know how you both feel as, as architects, as people who have worked in the planning, how we can deal with that. Because right now it just happens. We don't know whether the galaxy is merging or we are just getting a sprawl. There's no sense, even if we look at on the Google map. That's one thing. And the second one was about mobility. When you look at what was envisaged, this one is giving reverb, was so diametrically opposite to what we fear. We are against the Crown Road because we think the traffic is going to come in, where it was exactly for the opposite reason it was created. And you mentioned, and you also mentioned, studies by, on mobility. So can we actually talk about mobility without, coming to terms with the plan? What are we talking about?
Yeah, Anupama has very well shown how much work actually has to be done, how much work has been done, but also how much it seems that it all of a sudden got interrupted and never developed any further into the necessary detail. the question comes up immediately, shouldn't we concentrate on team building to do the obviously necessary work? I hope you all agree that a lot of work has to be done, a lot of integrated work. It is not that only Auroville consists out of lines of force, for instance. The lines of force, as I have spoken to you just now, have a foot point where actually city life takes place. And that's where we have to think about, not about the high-rise alone. And there comes mobility in, there comes communication, there comes space and scale and all these kind of things in. And come back to you, I'm an architect, but I feel very uncomfortable just to place a building somewhere without having any idea how is this area actually going to evolve in future. And we as architects got trained, whenever we start a building, first think about the city. So let me repeat, we should think about team building. And when we don't feel able to do that, because we seem to try it now since 50 years, shouldn't we acknowledge our ignorance and ask for help?
Somewhere for me, the city does emerge, and it emerges out of practical necessities. It emerges under a sort of inner compulsion of its own growth from within. And so that is actually one of the things, what actually, after years and years and years of not giving the city a slightest little bit of thought, quite frankly, I was leaving it to other people, it was not my field. When sitting in some planning meetings at Matrimondia trying to figure out just a very small little pavilion to replace the offices that are going to be taken down, we started to realize that on the master plan, there was already the access that we needed in exactly the place where we needed it. Since those discussions started, more and more things have come up that make it seem more and more obvious that this entrance from the west side, that will be a kind of both a doorway and a gate. A portal to a city has a dual function. It lets people in, but it also keeps people out. And if you imagine that we're going to have a very strong access coming from the new highway, coming very directly to more or less vaguely the visitor center present area, and you see already the thousands and thousands of visitors who are coming to Auroville just mostly for a day, for a few hours. This is the humanity as a whole is banging right on our doorstep, and we have to find a way to receive them. But we have to find a way to receive them that really fulfills the inner function. You know, we can't just build another visitor center. We have to, if Auroville belongs to humanity as a whole, then we have to create something that resonates to humanity as a whole. That when people come, when they leave, they've had a feeling that they've had something inspirational happen in their day, in their 2 days, in their week, that they take out and it spreads. So for me, it's like this project that's just kind of, for me, it's just dropping from the heavens, as it were, is actually rooted in the fact that right now there is a real need that has to be answered, but that if we're going to answer it in a way that makes any sense, then indeed we have to get together in a real team. We have to use all our researches, both from inside and without. We have to fulfill the charter in the creation of this next phase of the city development. Otherwise, it's not worth building anything. There's no point. We have to pull this together. 50 years now, it's time to pull it together.
I came in 1968 and we met first times Roger. We were quite stricken by his strong aspiration toward beauty. I would say that the aesthetical sense that Roger has always tried to express was very, very much also stamped in the galaxy plan. I just report you once what he had told us. No, he said, "Oh, but you know, I want to make a plan for a city where the roads are paved with mosaic of Picasso and windows of a public building designed by Chagall." No, he was expressing this as a symbolic, and of course, the reality of the Auroville at the time and even today is not really at the level what Roger wanted to impress, wanted to express. But this aesthetical side for me is very important, and I understand the concern of Judith about the visitors and the masses of visitors, that we are worried also, because also the tourism, the mass tourism is not always it's not establishing the level of what we really aspire for. No, but I would say that the galaxy, as it is, as a model that we have seen so far, the beautiful model of 1968, in a way, I don't know. I have the impression it was not designed for tourism. The tourism was something at the time not even thought about.
Sorry, not designed for?
For tourism, no, for the daily invasion of people coming, looking for, and asking stupid questions and aspiring. So this is.
I would like actually to add to this. In fact, the problem, I discussed this also with Roger, in fact, and what he explained is now the number of people coming compared to our population, they are the main people. They are the floating population is main. But why is that? Because in any city, or if we would build the city's population, the city life will be happening, and the tourists, any other city, they disappear, except in very spectacular places like Venice, where you can have a traffic jam of walking. Like, it's really quite shocking, actually, in the guest season. So I think the guest season climatic factor will always be a problem from December to February. But the daily tourism, in fact, Roger had even explained how to handle that entry, Judith, that in the bottom of the line of force, because he said the only way to hide that, not hide, but not to have this train of people roaming around, is that if you design exhibition spaces, because that's the only ones that don't need light and ventilation of that type, which tropical climates demand on us normally. But if there is a long exhibition space going from the entry that informs, it's not only about shops and sales, it's about informing and discussing the problems of humanity, and not only how Auroville will respond, but just not looking at it being an Auroville space, but it's a place for humanity to think about these issues and the purpose of Auroville and why is Auroville doing all that. So there is this whole the longest line of force, which goes into the city center, where it is quite low at that point, emerging from the gardens. And it ends in the entrance of Matri Mandir. So the tourists will have, it's like a shortcut. And there you could have those moving walkways, which everybody was laughing when I came here. Oh, Roger wants to have those, what they have in every airport now, which we keep on using. And when Roger said that those are the things so that they don't have to walk for long, we were like so shocked. You know, like we are saying, what? Moving walkway? My God, as if it's science fiction. But the fact is, everywhere, even in Pondi, they have escalators and all of that. Today, maybe those things don't shock us and look at it as a normal plan, that you have this exhibition, long airport-like thing. While you're getting there, instead of being in the sun and all that, you're going and stop there. There are benches, you'll take rest, go slowly, and reach Matri Mandir directly. And the citizens who are staying on top of it are also spared the tourism thing.
Also, I was going back to that report. For that first report is actually very interesting because it's almost seeds everything we need to look back at again. And one of the things when Roger brings to her the suggestions for the cultural zone, which is basically education and a few other things, she says, education can wait now. I want exhibition hall spaces, auditoriums. You know, basically she's just looking for cultural spaces. And she has called this the city of universal culture. And it is to bring that compactness, that sense of humanity as a first dimension of Auroville. Of course, when we were left to ourselves, we had to look at our famous ground realities and we had to plant. But in the process, many things were forgotten. So I would like to bring one question to all of you, is, all right, we have spoken about the different, problems and everything. Unless, Anu, you have something else, we'll come back to it. Now to move forward, what would really help the city to emerge? We have the issue of the land, what are the basics we need as a first emergence to work towards?
I would say the will. When we say Auroville, I wanted to actually start by saying where there is a will, there is a way. But even will, as in French, that the city is a symbol of, when the mother talks about all men of goodwill. And I think at one point I realized two things were required when we used to talk with Roger. One is the knowledge to be able to do it. And it need not only come from us. There is knowledge already today in the world to build all those ideas. And there are all those experts, and we have no worries about now the knowledge part. Because all those have overtaken us. And go to Copenhagen and see impressions of line of force and people walking on the terraces and them calling those projects, let's create a mountainscape. Other people have taken these ideas and they have already built them. And the one they have built, they are building now in Toronto, the same Danish people, is going to be 18 stories. You can just check it out. But knowledge has been achieved. The will is important. And I think that dispersion which we had, which was necessary to make the ground able to, sustain the life here, I think if all of us, if everyone, whatever role we have, do it for the city. Like, I think we need the governance to help us negotiate and feel the unity in our daily lives. The people who are doing fundraising and not seeing isolated projects, but there is no fund for the city. There's an Auroville maintenance fund. There should be the first thing is to have the city, some people have been calling out, but it has gone upon deaf ears. But I think maybe because of the 50th year, and if today I don't see any issues to go ahead. I really personally don't, whatever areas I didn't have the knowledge, and I thought, let me go out and just build my own knowledge first of all. Because I felt even if I'm alone, I still find it interesting enough to, even if it doesn't get built, if I'm changing by doing this work, and that is already good enough for me. So I applied myself, but on the way, I found all these consultants. I met Jan Gale, who Helmut will be very happy to know because he's a lot of the ideas. We have all these shared ideas. I have met him. I'm bringing him to Bombay in April. If we want to solve the mobility, we know those people who will help us. We know the energy people. We know climate engineering to be able to do high rise and with tropical. We know all these people. There is no actual difficulty. The problem is that many of these plans which were made, for some reason, when I go to the working groups, there is a suppression of all this. Frankly, we are suppressing. The work I've done, it has not even been able to be shown. Ever, each 2 years, there is always good reasons why there is no time to, I come all the way, I have make the time and come, but the people don't have the time to actually have the meeting to even see. So I said, okay, can you see the document later? Even if we don't have neither the curiosity nor even you don't have to build it, just see, just look, but that curiosity is not there. So once Roger mentioned that, I asked him, what do you need? We were designing a town planning office to how many people we need. And he said, no, all we need is the collective goodwill. Because today we have everything else.
I would be very happy if somebody like Jan Gehl would come here and give a presentation. He's the chief consultant of the city of Copenhagen, and he's very well known about his ideas about urban design and city life. I imagine him asking us, who is going to do the planning here in Auroville? Can we meet and discuss things? He will ask what I mentioned, what actually is the team who does the work? Do we have an answer? Can we point out the persons and the names here in Auroville?
No. We'll say no, we don't have the planning team.
Okay.
Because the fact is like,
So I mentioned this would be the first step. As soon as we have established a team, constituted a team, there is a established planning process. Planners know in which steps they have to proceed, and normally they are very meticulous about them. They look first at what is there, at the land, the morphology of the land, the contour lines, the meteorology, and so on, and so on, and so on. I don't have to go into details. They look at other cities which people build in China or anywhere, and then they criticize and try to find out now what actually do we want to do. Let us become clear what we want to do. Let us formulate our basic aims, which will serve us as a reference and as criteria to evaluate all the solutions we ever come up with.
I have come to Auroville only very recently, but there is one factor which I think Auroville needs to sort out before the city can actually materialize, which is the question about population. See, how do you build a city for 2,100 people or 3,000 people? You definitely need to grow your population before you can grow a city. And I feel this manifestation is not happening because the need is not being felt by enough number of people. And I think that is the most important thing. We need enough number of people before we can get a city going. How do you build a city for 2,000? It just doesn't seem realistic to me.
I would like to just answer, sir, because we have had 2,000, we had a population around 2,000 already when I came. And these people are actually, some are leaving and some are coming, so we don't see. One of the reasons I would love some anthropology people, I have talked to people, to make a survey also about the people who are leaving. We never write those stories. Many people are also, I met people in the airport who have donated a lot of lands here. And when they came to see, people have shooed them away without meaning to complain about everyone, because they thought they are donating to a public interest project, but in reality, we had forgotten and people were busy in their own lives. So we have, in our working groups, we have also been rejecting in the entry groups, and all of them, the entry group says there's not enough housing to take the number of people wanting to come. The housing group feels that the planning group have not unblocked the place. So we are going around, I've watched this going around in circles for so long that I feel that yes, I also agree, but I feel that all of this will simultaneously when there is that clarity before implementing the plans, if we implement the right governance first, and the plans are all known by us, and we know where we are putting our energies, then we are prepared. Then the right kind of funding should come and be spent on the right kind of thing. And because right now, all the luxurious lives that we are leading here are all paid because it's not something we have earned. So my thing I wanted to tell Edzard also is that the indiscipline, or whatever, it's a joke to call it that, but you know, when we want to live by our free will, normally anywhere else, we have to foot the bill. We have to tolerate our neighbors if we cannot afford to buy 10 acres for ourselves. So we have to do some kind of life to live in that luxury. But here, we are gathering lands and we are not developing. So many people are also leaving. I think if the city would be clear, we would open up areas where, and of course the implementation will go hand in hand.
We are seriously running out of time. So Tuan, maybe we take one response from you, and then we'll keep the tea floating. So whoever wants tea can just walk out and go and get a tea, and we'll start taking questions. Right?
Yeah, the response to the question of what is the way forward, that is the question, yes. Right? So I think already I fully agree with Helmut that we need a team. But what should be the qualification of that team? We can't do all the work ourselves. And there are all these names of consultants which you have mentioned. So basically the team should be comprising of people who can take output from these consultants. And that means they don't have to be as good an expert as the consultant, but they should know the language of the consultant and get value for money, so to say. Number one. Number two is, the way forward is to get those detailed development plans. In other words, translate the master plan into DDPs. We have now a DDP for Sector 1 and Sector 2 of the residential zone, and we have to do that for all the zones. And then, indeed, the detailed planning will help the architects also. The question that you raised, where do I put my building? You only know that when there is a detailed development plan. Something has been mentioned about mobility. I want to make a very interesting statement about mobility. Do you remember that the mother had said small electric vehicles that can take 200 kg and drive at 15 kilometers an hour? You know who is thinking the same way? Google. Google is launching self-driving vehicles of that size, going at 15 to 20 kilometers an hour. And the whole mobility paradigm is going to shift completely from car ownership to using shared vehicles like Uber and Ola already are doing. So the mother was way ahead of time when she has identified that as a mobility solution. And my last point is on the famous roads. We always confuse, in my view, service corridors with roads. If I take, for example, the 12 radials, it is not required that all the 12 radials become roads. Maybe out of 12, 4 will become tennis, badminton courts, 4 can become solar plants, and we will see how many of them we actually need for transport. But they have to be claimed by the TDC. They have to be kept reserved. They have to be marked. They have to be cleared. But how we will use them, time will tell. And maybe out of those 12, on 4 or 5, you find those mothers' vehicles of 200 kilograms. Of course, the mother had in mind a very low diet, so that in that vehicle about 10 people could sit, or 6, ashram dining room diet. But the point I'm trying to make is she was way ahead of her time in terms of mobility. So we need not say that the radials and the crown are roads. They are simply service corridors to be kept. My last point is on energy. Another big paradigm shift which is happening outside is that in the energy sphere, there's going to be the end of the big power plants. And that is because we are going to have distributed generation. We are going to generate power on our own roofs and in our own gardens. And that also the mother had seen. In fact, she had seen that some of that power may have to be generated in industrial zone and the rest on the roofs. Now, I have made a calculation, and the good news is that with the present efficiency of solar panels, we can actually manage it on the roofs. So we can keep actually the industrial zone for other things, but we can easily manage an Auroville to be 100% energy neutral. And then these cars of 200 kilograms, their batteries will store energy out of that solar plant, and we can take it from the car when it is parked in the night. All that is happening. So there are paradigm shifts happening for which this plan is ready for it to manifest.
I would just like to respond to Mr. Chunkat, because I think it's a very valid point that you raise. And as Anu said, it's just we've been deflecting the situation, that we've sort of closed down the entry group from time to time because there's not enough housing, instead of preparing for it. So I think we need at this point to come to a conscious stage that we say, okay, then in the next few years, let's aim for 5,000, let's be prepared that 5,000 people can come. In the 10 years, let's be prepared, 10,000 people can come. So this whole idea of the city emerging was actually in ratio of the population emerging. So that's how to work with it. Anu, do you have a last thing? A short and, yeah. A short and then we open it out.
I just want to also add that the first plan, the last plan that Roger signed of the work I did was a city center urban development plan, in which we decided to shift our approach, and the city center up to the Crown Road, the inside has 5,000 people. So he said that the first aim is to build the city center, because inside the city center, it is possible even today to go everywhere pedestrian and with bicycles or segways or whatever it is. Because every zone enters the city center. So that is a melting pot. So if we would develop the prototypes of cultural zone, industrial zone, all the zones, residential and international, inside. First, he said, manifest the unity, and the population, now we are 2.5, we will be 5. That is realistic. And thereafter, each one, we will have experimented and worked out. People are fearing the center to make mistakes. But if we solve it, then everything will naturally radiate from there to the outside. So we don't have to fear it. We do have to solve that one structure which comes from outside. So we manage and do not say no to the outsiders who are our future Aurovillians, probably. A lot of them are. So we should not shut the door to the whom we are calling tourists now, because they are possibly potential Aurovillians.
Okay, I think we're ready. There was one hand up from Fred already. Fred, would you like to take the first?
It's a bit of a historical reflection. There was a time in the beginning of Auroville when the idea was the workers of Auroville would all be housed in Pondicherry and bused to the working site. So it was a clear concept. This was a construction site. In effect, the first house which was to be designed was an Automodel, which was like a workers' camp or outside of the construction site. And maybe I take the guilt of having insisted, no, I want to be in the city, and by that spoil that plan. Because, and Roger very often said about, building houses within the city, building roads, planting trees, will create problems in the future. And I said, no, we cut them down, we shift them, we are all temporary buildings. As he said, I know about your temporary. So I feel that if, it's not saying that we rerun the history back for the future, but if our awareness would be here, these 2,000 and maybe 1,500 adults are not here to be safe and comfortable. They actually were meant to build the city, and we don't know for whom. So we are not building it for us.
Hello, my name is Mario. I'm from Argentina. I'm curious to know what has Roger Angé developed for the governance of the city. He spent his last year thinking of the important things, and what has he came out about governance, and what is your view about this, how Auroville has to be governed?
Well, there were several diagrams that he used to keep doing. He used to be on the governing board and till the end of his life. And but he felt he represented the Aurovillians, so he never actually complained about, or it would be tempting to expect some action, but he never did that, because he always said that it must be a collective will that is asking for it. So when we used to design things, we were not trying to by hook or by crook get things approved, because it was known that it has to be willed by all, and that the plans will get negotiated according to be what is right. So he had various, I mean, it would be too long an answer, but I think all of these questions should be noted and shared, but one of the tone, the mood of that type of governance was about not creating institutions for their own sake and forgetting what for it is, because not difficulty, our day-to-day difficulty driven, like, oh, now we have no houses, let's make a group for solving, we have this and that. He said, yes, that has its own role, but the governance should mainly be about being a vehicle to manifest the unity of the or everyone, and it should be oriented on creating the future. The vision of Auroville should be in the everyday parlance of the people and not about a problem people had. Those are on the personal level, and it shouldn't be given so much importance.
Hello, my name is Jan Gormiewski. I'm a very experienced urban designer, but my real special area is psychotoxicity in design. That is where city designs poison people. And I see Roger's very 20th century rationalist design, and I can see it for its aesthetics, I can see it for its vision, but I can also see it for its poison, and it does have some. And there's so many areas I can look at, but one of the things that you have to be very careful with a city is that the city center must be pedestrian, and the rest of the city has to be a not city. You know, it has to be the green belt. And that area between, and that kind of flow of getting more and more green beltish is dangerous. It leads to suburbs, it leads to transport by vehicles only. I don't care if they're electric, I don't care if they're escalators. It isn't right for Auroville. I can feel it. I've only been here for a few weeks, and I'm only going to be here for a few weeks more. But it is that middle zone that we should be very careful of in Auroville. Another thing about making a master plan happen, and I've seen this happen also, if you want a master plan to work, you mark the edges first. You take the points in the middle and you define those edges. You take the points on the outside and you define those edges, and then things start to flow. And there must be flexibility to change. You should not be rigidly stuck on a master plan, because people change, needs change, concepts change. And for goodness sakes, we're in a desert here, and there isn't even enough water for the people in Auroville now, much less when there are 50,000. The water thing is really important, and one of the things that you can do for water, and they're doing it elsewhere, is you're making solar generation for electricity. You can take salt water from the sea, which is conveniently very nearby, and run the salt water over the electric PV cells, and that cools the PV cells, making them much more efficient, and it heats the water, making it ready for a solar distillery to actually make fresh water out of seawater and make salt at the same time.
Wonderful, thank you. Actually, some of the things you said are part of that 65 report, including this thing of bringing, desalinizing water in whatever means to create a water supply. Does somebody, I'd like to, Anu, would you like to say something?
I'd just like to say one thing. I agree to the entire thing.
Yeah.
I just want to say that the picture that I showed is a block model of a thing. And if you read the actual document, you'll find the flexibility. But without defending any of that, I totally agree with all those values. I just want to say one factual difference in the first part of what you said about the city center being the pedestrian thing. That type of thing was very deliberate in this case, even though all those Mediterranean towns were quoted as examples, and also for the reasons you mentioned. The reason why in the case of, if you take Venice, it's a very good example, Venice, because if you see, I talked about traffic jams of people walking. So if one were to concentrate activities in the city and then manage the periphery like you mentioned, we would have that, because Auroville has more than a purpose of its daily life. There is a lot of people, floating population coming here. So it was very deliberately, what you spoke that should happen in the city center was aligned in what I didn't explain called the crown. The whole crown, which is the border of the city center, it's a ring of all those facilities, and everything inside is pedestrian, but much more unbuilt. And so all that, in that spine of activities, the common part of every zone, and there is a lot of overlap in them too, and it also has habitat on top of it. So all of that, the circulation of the concentration of people in the city center were pushed back to that halfway distance between the center and the periphery, exactly halfway. So the radius inside is only 675 meters. And everything, if we would do the 5,000 people city center thing, we would have a higher proportion of cultural spaces than residential. So they would solve the needs of the current Aurovillians, but also take care of all those future activities for the international zone and all the high flux of outsiders coming in. So because of that purpose, like he said, Roger, that there's no international zone in a typical city, which we have. And that means there will be a lot of flow of people. For that, it was very important to keep the center as a park. Like if Central Park in New York would be the center for all. That was the only difference, but the scale is all much smaller.
It is not easy to convey the information altogether, because as Anupama has shown, not only there are different models, but Roger from the very beginning kept changing. So she has been referring to a report which is dated September 7, 1965. And you already have many concepts there which will be kept. And there is also one thing that she has not highlighted, that from the very beginning, Roger said that the building should be kind of final. Then there is an interview in 1967, which is already quite different from the concept of the galaxy, and which answer also this question of mobility and service and business and so on. This is an aspect which has been highlighted by Gilles Guigon in particular, that if you read that interview, Roger presented the crown, which in fact will be called the service ring. It is the present town planning, they call the Crown Road, but in fact that was the service ring. But in 1967, he was very active, and also eventually with, is not mentioned business, but you can understand from the kind of description that he gives that will be broadly accessible to everybody. Already there, and already in 1965, Roger highlighted the concept of the beautiful city of the past. So already in 65, Roger talks strongly against the tyranny of the cars. Then in 67 and in 68 with the galaxy, he also explained not only what has already been raised, the issue of that the mother highlighted, the 15 kilometers by the hours, but in the galaxy itself, afterwards, it was presented a project to have underground electronically driven capsules for speed traffic and heavy traffic. So, and on top of that, when Roger mentioned the beautiful city of the past, he mentioned the streets, which are not the road. Streets are just kind of gathering, friendly gathering, human gathering, and also architecturally with porch to provide shadow from the sun. So this reply to all the many issues that he has been raised. And by the way, it was also something that Ajit, who died, but he was an early collaborator of Roger, kept raising. You cannot have a city without the streets. So we have to build the streets in this sense. And then what I would like to highlight, going back to Roger, and also kind of reply to Edzat, is not a point of obedience. It is something that Roger showed to us is surrender. So when Roger was planning, came up with that report in 1965, at the same time Roger was building the 3 towers of Grenoble, which not only were the tallest residential buildings of Europe, but in 2010, when Roger was already dead, has been recognized, and I don't know whether people in Auroville are aware, they've been recognized as France Heritage Patrimoine. So at the same time he was building that, he never had any idea to replicate this in Auroville. And in fact, he came up not even with the galaxy, he came up with the plan in '66, which is the radial city of Renaissance. And then he started evolving slowly toward the galaxy with another plan in 1967, which the mother had accepted, and the mother accepted all those plans, but Roger always kept evolving and finally came up with the galaxy, which is kind of synthesis of all this. But the beauty is that Roger himself didn't know, he and his team, where he would land. It's something that kept evolving like this. Then I don't feel talking what's happening right now, but there are 2 issues, and in fact is what Anupama just said. Either we build a galaxy, either we build a real town, and the town means minimum, as she said, in Berlin, 5 stories. It means 25 inhabitants 25 square meters for inhabitants. But what we are doing here is nothing, and we are just hiding behind the galaxy, which means the lines of force, which we have no intention to do, and so we keep sprawling and sprawling and sprawling. And the other things that I don't understand, we have, is not only that we have architects who don't know how to do, we also have architects who know. For example, Helmut, or for example, Pino. Pino showed me 10 years ago that he was building a huge 3-story building in Calcutta. Then he comes here, what he does, 1-story Maitreya. Helmut is building several stories in Pond itself, but here he builds 1 story. Not because there is something wrong with them, it's because we don't allow them to build something else. And so we have to stop with these things. Either we do the galaxy, either we do an ordinary town, which means 5 stories building.
I just want to say that it's because of Paulette that we have that 1965 report in translation. So thank you. And for everything else that you've been collecting. Other questions? Peter, you had something?
Yeah, a question also. But first of all, I must say that I'm very happy that this, how to say, overview or this visioning here, what you presented, is happening finally, because actually 20 years ago, I wished so much that this would happen, because many people in Auroville, more than we believe, and there Anu is right, they don't understand still today why a city. And so the number 1 city, number 2, this form, which was developed, that is one thing I wanted to say, and I found it very well presented, and there are many questions and how to bring it on the ground, and particularly what about the social architecture and the money architecture belonging to that. That was my question when we were discussing now details in the city urban space and structure. When there's no money exchange, as is one of the, and no cars is another flow, how is it different from any city elsewhere? Or are there examples, and there are maybe campuses and similar things, where we can emulate something from there? So money is my question, and the self-governance was also mentioned, and the team working Helmut mentioned. So this may create a new understanding, a new spirit for team working, where your presentation is a good starter, like Anu's last time, and thank you for that.
Is there any comment from, or you just want to go on to the next question? Yeah.
Well, I don't have any question, but here I have a comment to say that if you see any of the World Heritage Site in India, and if you see the roots of those buildings or the architectures, it has been built up through the sadhaks or the devotees at that time who were following some gurus or the deities. You can search out any of the building, World Heritage Site of India. And the same thing has been repeated in the case of Matri Mandir as well, when it has been built up by the sadhaks or the devotees at that time who were following some gurus or the divine consciousness. Now, here we talk about the planning, and I feel somewhere the planners or the architects, when Mother has talked about the city, of course, but Mother has also talked about the qualities of those citizens. So now here we have the gap in between when the planners are planning for the cities, but are they really looking at the qualities which the citizens needs to imbibe? And maybe it may possible that the planner or the architects may build the city, but where it is going to be end? Because those things also needs to be taken care of while parallelly we are building the city. Thank you.
Is there anybody who wants to take it on? I would just like to say one thing before I do, is that you're aware of this little document which says to be a true Orwellian. Well, I think that goes hand in hand if we are able to build that city. Without attempting that, we cannot really come to that. So
I think that Ravindra has just put his finger on a really crucial point. But in fact, when we want, whether we are a planner or a builder or an artist or a farmer, we're all here as aspiring to be willing servitors of the divine consciousness. And in every aspect, if we want to move forward in materializing the physical city, we have to incorporate this, each one of us, into our work, which in the end comes down to daily work. You know, and if the planners incorporate their aspirations into their work, and the rest of us collaborate as the workers in the construction of what we have to build, whether we're probably not going to lay brick on brick and pour concrete like we did at Matra Mandir, but there is, in building this city, there is opportunity for everybody to incorporate their skills, be it in textiles, designs, education, everything. There is space for everything to be incorporated. And when each one of us does our daily work, as we try always to do from the highest point that we have, we will create the energy will manifest. This city will emerge as somewhere that is really the place we want to live, the place that is inspiring to live and inspiring for other people to come, and 50,000 people will quickly emerge.
I just want to comment on what you said about the sadhaks have to build, right? Ideally speaking. Or a very interesting thing happened in 1971, 1972. Suddenly there came a message from Pondicherry that the mother has decided that Mata Mandir should be done by a contractor. So then everybody was up in arms, and already we had big spiritual egos because we thought we have to inject our consciousness into the concrete. So it was thought that must be one of those things that Roger has influenced the mother. So in the afternoon, there was another person visiting the mother always, Mr. Nata, who was running Udavi school. And he was asked by those people, can you please verify with the mother, because we don't believe that the mother would have said that Mata Mandir should be done by a contractor. So they were all waiting at Nata's house. So Nata went in the evening, and they were all waiting in his house for the outcome of that discussion. So Nata sat down and he said, yes, I've met the mother. And she told me indeed the same thing, that it has to be a contractor. And in my case, she even named the contractor. She said ECC. And ECC was the contractor who was doing Bharat Niwas. Now, the only reason that it didn't happen is because we were not very good in paying ECC and Bharat Niwas. So they said, we will do it if you give us 30 lakhs advance. And 30 lakhs was a lot of money for those days. So the advance was not paid, and ECC did not do Matrimondia. Mother was extremely pragmatic. She was very pragmatic. The same story I can tell you about the digging of the hole, where also at one point of time it was actually given on contract to people from the village. So yes, ideally speaking, the Aurovilians should participate, but not that because of that the work gets delayed. That was her approach.
Yeah, only one thing, since you mentioned we have to be pragmatic, it's not a good thing. I continue with what I said about the planning and the forming of a team. It's not a good thing if the planners also give themselves their own policies. We have to create a separate body, separate apart from the planners, which think about policies, aims and objectives, and pass on to the planners what they actually want. And then the planners have to come back to them, and they might have to return and synthesize, and so on and so on. So we need a client body.
Thank you. I think we are quite beyond time. One question, any more? Jaya? And you. Lisa first.
Mine is not so much maybe a question, but something that I live in the Greenbelt and I face every day, the fact that the Greenbelt can't connect to power. So that raised within me a question why it bothered me. Is it just a personal inconvenience? But it raises a much further question when I read a little article done by Rishi Walker on the Euronet that kind of got me thinking on a few things of the disconnection of seeing the city as a whole and disconnecting the Greenbelt from the city. It is not two entities, it is one. And that is, I think, one of the major hurdles in the coming city planning.
Which is, yes, I think everybody will support that, and that is the only way we can grow. There's no way that we can grow in separation, especially now. And that's why we see, when we are putting out the Galaxy plan, the city plan, we are putting it including the Greenbelt, not without. That should not happen. Who was the next person?
No, it's something I have been thinking about very recently, and I kind of wonder about it, because the entry is very much blocked in relation to housing, no? And has been for a long time. And I was looking at the entry, and then I was looking at that enigma with the housing and the impossibility and how we look at it, no? And then it struck me that if I made a comparison to other development that we have done, for example, and I think when you say this thing about the 50,000, Mother says about the 30,000, it's much more easy, no? Because actually with the tree planting, we know that there was a long period when there was a lot of maximum impact put. Only when you come to a certain point, percentage or whatever, suddenly the forest regenerates itself, no? And it struck me it's actually the same thing with the city building and the housing, that actually we are kind of putting the housing responsibility on the individuals who come, and we can't do that at this stage when you cannot generate the funds in the city because it's too small, no? So we actually have to recognize, and we feel always that it's an individual responsibility, this housing thing, and we are in an enigma because you can't put it on the young people, and it's only middle-aged people who can sell their house outside and come, no? So if we can change our way of looking and realize this is a big issue for fundraising, because up to a certain pivotal point, we have to create, we still have to do that kind of, we have to pioneer the city in the same way we pioneer the forest, no? So we actually have to, because we feel like it's not our responsibility, it's the next person's responsibility. No, it is our responsibility actually to bring the city to that level where it can regenerate itself somehow. I felt that was for me a very important insight in relation to entry. So we cannot keep blocking entry because people don't have, we have to shift our mindset there, no? Maybe you can say something about this, Anupama, because of course I have no idea what are the numbers. I wanted to ask the foresters, what was the time, what was the shift when this is changing, no?
I think one of the difficulty is that when people build their own house, because frankly, who can build an own house anywhere in the world? The average person rents a house wherever they live. They have a job and some portion of it goes to the house. And in fact, we measure the quality of a city by what percentage of income goes into renting a house compared to what they generate. Even if we don't get the money directly, like in Oroville, that's a measure of, it's an indicator for housing. So if we always look upon renting and all badly because we think that it is like the outside world. But the problem is, if you build your own house and the first 2-3 years, people are the most charged. Instead of going and working in all the things they're passionate about, they are left to their own, spending every day going to Pondi, carrying pipes and all that kind of we see on the way, you know, with struggling. And then later, because of our own policies, and I really appreciate Helmut's point about the policy, because every city, no planners can work if apart from the client body, you know, there is another process for the actual policy making, which has to come back. Like if I design a service road, they have to decide what timings they are going to give for use and so on. So we cannot proceed without that. But coming back to that, there is this thing that if we were to rent, it would be bad. But by the time 3 years pass, you've lived that reality and invested everything you had. Even maybe you want to leave, but you feel I'm stuck here because of my life savings. So there are many problems of manifesting your own design. Maybe they don't want to do that. They have had to do that. So I think if we can, if we don't want to call it renting, whatever it is, contribution, or will feels less guilty maybe to call it contribution, people can contribute something that is really affordable. Then that's the only way we will realize that every city is like that. It doesn't belong to the people usually. Very few people, very elite people own houses.
Very short thing, when Anu mentioned all the thing of the modern, I thought that I knew everything by heart, no? I have listened to that 100 times. But there was one thing which she even said before the charter, which seems to reply to all our questions. When she said, welcome to men of goodwill. If we could have that will change everything. We see that, and that's only right, but that's what encapsulates everything. We have to rediscover the goodwill we had when we came, and it's not very far.
Okay, very short. My name is Klaus from Germany. I'm a real estate developer. We heard a lot about planning. To do the planning, I do have to have a plan. And my question is, I'm a first-timer of Oroville. I'm very excited about this village. And I read all the brochures about Oroville, but I saw this very spectacular model about the galaxy and so forth, but I haven't seen any plan. And the question is, where do we want to stand in 5 years, in 10 years? And then we can say, well, we have to do some infrastructure, we have to do some thinking about traffic and so forth, we have to do thinking about what kind of buildings we want to build and where, but first comes the plan.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's the plan and how it also matches the intention of the city, both together. So that's a double thing. Are we done? I think everybody has had. Mr. Chunkat, would you like to say something?
I would like to suggest that we have a look at what has been done till now, what is the amount of square feet area we have built up, and what is the kind of use we have put it to. Because I am sorry, but I'm again coming back to the big problem, which is the population. Unless we take care of, as somebody mentioned, the entry policies, get more people in, and make it easy for them to stay in rented houses, you're going to have a plan which is going to be very dysfunctional, because you have Bharat Niwas with so many empty buildings, it's like a ghost town. I stay in Swagatam, so I see it every day. So I just thought I should mention it. Probably not what you wanted to hear.
No. It's very valid. And on top of that, I think, I don't know, this is a totally different topic, but perhaps we need to consider multiple economies functioning for multiple layers of people. We cannot apply the same rule for everybody. And that is something which we have tried in maybe small ways, but it's something which needs to be explored further. Okay. I think we've all had enough. So in which case, and so thank you everybody. Thank you to Anupama for being there. Thank you very much to all the panelists, the ones who have disappeared as well. And of course, for all of you for being here. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The cats would like to remind you that on the 31st of Jan, we have Understanding the Auroville Foundation Act. Thank you.